Yeah, I think so.
Yes, we're live.
You try to pay me back for messing with you all this time today. All right, we're live on Facebook. We got another episode to run with it. This is Behind the Scenes with Angela Ferrante, or as Ethan likes to say, Ferrante. We are going to show you the unedited version of our interview here. If you would like to see the polished or listen to the polished, edited, really concise version, then subscribe to our podcast. You can find it on any podcast player, run with it. Review. Let us know what you think about it. We love to hear from our listeners. So with that said, let's get into the episode. You guys ready?
Ready.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Welcome to Run With It, where we bring you business ideas from proven founders. Each episode, you'll hear a new business idea and the exact steps our guest would take to get started. We're your hosts, Chris Justin
and Ethan Janney. And on today's episode, we have Angela Ferrante. Angela is the founder and CEO of Laudable, a startup making it easier and more affordable to create video content by doing it all remotely. Laudable is out to kill the boring B2B marketing archetype, PDF case study, and bring human stories to life through video. Angela was previously the founding CMO at SparkFund, a venture-backed energy technology company. Before SparkFund, she started the Alternative Energy Group at a Boston-based insurance company.
That's super impressive, Ethan, and kind of terrifying. Angela, I didn't know you were so scary, but I guess I'll just, be on our A game here.
It's going to out to kill all kinds of things.
Yeah, jeez. Glad this is remote. We'll talk about Laudable a little bit during the episode, but our show is about new business ideas, and you've got one to improve management and leadership training. How did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so I almost went down this path of starting this business about a year ago. I did a bunch of exploration work and some customer discovery and even some prototyping. But the basic background and idea was that I was joined this company, SparkFund, as CMO with very little formal management training and frankly, very little management experience. And you're sort of thrust into this environment of being responsible for other humans and their job performance without knowing how to do that. The classic new manager problem. And all of the traditional resources for how to do that well felt super dated, right? It's like you can go to an offsite in a boring conference room with a mahogany table and sit around and do trust falls and talk about, how to manage. That's one way that certainly didn't resonate. And it was more expensive than we could afford. And there just really aren't great models that help new managers figure out how to do it. So I think there's a real opportunity and a gap in the market that I came up with at SparkFund.
I would love to do some trust falls.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's been too long since I've had a trust fall.
I haven't been at all in the corporate world, except from like the outside perspective, maybe working with people who are in it. But I recently listened to an audiobook on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And it's this book about how to make teams better. And, they have poor communication, poor alignment, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's like the big thing that everybody, the woman who's running the whole program, they make this fictional story up and she wants to have an offsite. And everybody's like, offsite, oh my God. And she's like, yeah, well, we're not going to go do trust falls or any of that BS, And I don't know. I just got to think like offsites and trust falls. It sounds really fun to me. Maybe I just haven't been in the corporate world enough.
It was just so campy, bordering on hokey, or not even bordering, just full on hokey. And to do that with your colleagues is just
that's it. That's
sort of cringy.
Yeah, because then I would be the guy at the offsite who kind of just creeps off by himself and actually has a good time. I'd probably just like make friends with like the staff at the place and like hang out after hours drinking or something like that. And then I'd get fired. So yeah, it probably wouldn't work.
Avoid that. There's got to be a better way. In doing research for this episode, Angela, one of the things that was provided some data behind the value of something like this. There's a research paper. It's from from 2016 out of Stanford that covers the productivity increase and actually the increased business success due to management training. There was this cohort that happened in Italian business, actually, where after World War II, some Italian businesses got management training from the US and some didn't as part of the Marshall Plan. So it created this really interesting case study, and it wasn't the best businesses that got it. But the ones who did, after 15 years, still had demonstrably better results. Their businesses were larger. They had more investment. Their contribution to GDP was larger. All of those things that you would consider to be a successful business. It was something like a 50% increase from management training just at that time. So I think it's important to frame that for the listener that this isn't something that's just like a nice to have and makes your employees feel good and valued. It's something that can make a big difference in the success of a business.
Yeah, well, and if you think about it just anecdotally, people leave managers, they don't leave companies. And I'm sure everybody has their horror stories of worst boss ever. They're like, I had to get out of there. Everything else could have been amazing. And I think one of the stats was 75% of employees considered their direct manager to be the worst part of their job. That's really depressing. And so if you can even improve a manager's sort of performance / likability, and likability is a tricky one, but certainly effectiveness by 10%, that makes a huge bump overall, productivity-wise, morale-wise, company-wide.
All right, you sold us on this being a problem and the opportunity that's available by closing this gap. What do you think the value of this solution would be?
So I think one of the sort of sub problems is that there's a ton of incredible content out there. I would not suggest someone go out and try to recreate the wheel on writing a textbook or any ebook or any form of content around here's how to be an effective, great manager. There's so much good research. Google Rework has an awesome project around this and a lot of amazing content, videos, et cetera. But it's all over the place, right? It's not the organization and structure around it is sort of tricky to find, even within something that is supposed to be organized like a LinkedIn Learning or formerly lynda.com. So I think one value would be just organizing and providing some structure and guidance to the incredible content that is out there around management training and eventually leadership development. And then the other thing I think is providing some accountability, right? I remember talking to colleagues at Spark Fund who were incredibly passionate about improving themselves as managers and just as people. Yet when you actually looked at what they did from a management development perspective on their own, it wasn't very much because it always got crowded out by other objectives they had to achieve on their job or just day-to-day work and life, right? As we all know, with priorities on all things. And so being able to have something that, in this form, if it's an app or whatever the format looks like, that holds you accountable and is checking in with you regularly and sort of dosing out material and telling you, here's what to do in this next week. And then checking in with you and asking if you did it. I think there's huge value in that because it's sort of that small actions compound factor that lets you actually spend a little bit of time each week or each day or whatever it is to get better.
You mentioned something like really in passing, really quickly, and it just intrigued me. So I don't know how much you know about it, but I'm just curious. You said Google Rework, and I looked that up right now, and it looks like it's literally regarding, right, with a colon work. And I have never heard of this. What do you know about it? What's going on there? Has this been helpful to you?
Yeah, it's been a while since I have really dug in, but they have. I think it's an ongoing project. I want to say it started about 10 years ago to investigate what, management principles, how we work, effective meetings, all of these things. And they just continually check in with from their own employee base as sort of the sandbox to evaluate. For example, there's a framework around good management that I think it's like 10-point framework or something that is continually updated based on what their own findings are, and may in fact take outside perspective as well. I'm not sure. So there's kind of a wealth of information and a ton of gems in there around how to manage. I mean, there are literal templates and frameworks for here's how to have a one-on-one, and it's all free and available online.
That's really cool. I have to put out a gripe here real quickly. Google.
Yes.
And their employment style. Okay, let's set aside the whole thing about all the world's information is free except all of our interior information is super proprietary if you work here. But this like I hear all these things about Google management, and then I go ask somebody who works at Google about them, and they're like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like I always really loved this when I heard about, I think it's like a 70-20-10 ratio. We want you to work 70% on your job, and I think it was 20% on
free time.
There was a certain percentage you get to work on like a passion project, and they're all about innovation, so they don't care. Yeah, and I have a friend who worked as a developer at Google, and I was like, yeah, what about that 70-20-10 thing? He's like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Do you think it's a product of the company is just so large that the practices aren't consistent, or like, what do you think's going on?
I think that, yeah, I really don't know, because I never worked at Google myself. I've been to lunch there with friends a couple times, but like I think it's part of it is they started the company small, and then they had their ways of doing things. And then as it grew larger, they might change or adapt, or, they allow certain managers to do things their own way. But some part of it makes me wonder, and it's a little bit more of the cynical perspective, if it's just PR, if it's just Google had found early on, if they put out all these articles about their cool and alternative ways of working, that people would just start to, I mean, for God's sakes, there was a movie about working at Google. How did that ever happen? With like, do you remember that? Owen Wilson or something was.
I think I've seen that movie. Yeah, it wasn't really that good, but
he's an intern.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But it was like, so part of me just wonders if they just they don't really care as much whether it's true, but they put stuff that sounds cool out there about what it's like to work at Google, because then people will be intrigued and want to work there.
So to the listener out there who works at Google, you can anonymously share your experience.
Tell us.
I was going to say,
or disprove. Yeah.
You guys are going to get outreach from a Google HR person / lawyer.
Desist.
Exactly.
I'll just cut Ethan off at that point and
anyway.
Very conveniently switch topics here. I think this idea, it's a nice compliment to the listener to the episode with Rob Fitzpatrick, which puts you in good company, Angela. As you probably know, Rob is the author of The Mom Test, which is a very well-known book in entrepreneurship. He was on our show and talked about lesson plans as a product. So again, that's episode 37. Go check that out for the listener. It also reminds me, so you're bringing this idea up. Rob brought something similar up on Union Square Ventures. It's a venture capital fund. They have a request for a startup. It's titled Looking for Syllabus 2.0. And it's exactly like you're describing. There's a ton of information out there, but it's not well organized. And it's not curated in a way that's easily digestible. It's not, hey, watch this YouTube video from 3 minutes and 27 seconds to 6 minutes and 15 seconds, and then read this article. And then, it's not sequenced and it's not curated in a compelling way. So, just hearing this idea come up over and over again from some really smart people who have been entrepreneurs and are have funded entrepreneurs, the listener out there, like that should be a really clear signal that this is something worth working on.
Also, a tip and a tweak here when it comes to content. I think at least to me, it used to feel like creating content was the value. If I wasn't the expert and I didn't create the content, I might not have much value to offer. And now I'm noticing more and more there's this counterintuitive thing of just going and finding the content and organizing it for someone else and making sure it's in the right order and making sure they know that it's valuable too. That especially, I think, will only become more important as we get more and more information. It's so noisy, right? There's so many blog articles, so many YouTube videos, so many things out there. If you could be a person that knows how to curate it and put it in the right order, then it's just as valuable as being able to create the content in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. Right. It follows this arc of like, if there's a dearth of content, you can have a comparative advantage and really stand out by being the one to create that content. If it's amazing content or even just decent content, or in the early days, you think about when people first started coming out with blogs, and then there becomes an overabundance of the content and you're getting flooded with stuff left and right. And the same thing with our email inboxes, right? It was like create a newsletter, and now it's more about pare that down and curate a newsletter. So I think the curation piece becomes really important. And within this concept, if you can then pair that with the actual action steps and kind of accountability, I think there's a winning combination.
I think we got sidetracked a little bit here. I want to bring it back to the value of this solution. You shared some numbers, both in terms of market size and in terms of the cost that you think that you could charge for this solution. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I remember having the same thing when we were doing research on this. It's like the market size numbers. You can look at leadership and development market. You can look at management training. You could look at corporate development. There's a couple different things there, but they all looked at between something. What numbers did I put? Like 60, between a 60 and 160 billion.
Yeah, hundreds of billions.
Yeah, hundreds of billions globally. So I think the market and the spend is there. From the research that we did when we were talking to HR leaders about how much would they pay for something like this, we tended to hear between $9 and $49 per month per employee. To do the math on that, but that seemed to be where people resonated.
Right. Which, if you're looking for, if you're targeting companies that have, 10 or 100 or 1,000 employees, then it starts to really scale. You're hitting some pretty large numbers there.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes a real enterprise play at that point.
Now, do you think you would shoot for enterprise? Is that the goal of this? Am I shooting for a small business owner who only has 10 to 20 employees? Or are we just saying, really our market is only above 100 or even only above 1,000 or 10,000 employees? Where do you think someone might want to shoot for a primary target?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the person's background and what types of companies they're in HR and they've worked at large companies. They may have a bit more credibility in that particular market. One thing that I did think was interesting and sort of presents a challenge to this, not insurmountable, but a challenge to getting this business started, is that traditionally the startup advice is start doing it immediately, ship your product when you're embarrassed, just get in market, which is super solid advice and I think holds regardless. But when we're talking about a product that is education-based and that it also involves something as sort of sacred as management philosophy and approach, you've got to be a little bit careful, because if you just go in, gunslinging willy-nilly with like, here's my management training program and it's crap, you're going to sort of shoot yourself in the foot. So I think there has to be a little bit of a balance of how robust does the program have to be before you can start addressing enterprise customers.
I think it's a good
start mid-market.
That I'm jumping around a little bit here, but as you were describing that, I just thought of the fact that there's no Netflix for management training, right? What if you had David Allen's Getting Things Done coaching program, and you had access to that, and you had Oren Klaff's sales, or you had I'm trying to look at my bookshelf here to see Cal Newport's Deep Work Philosophy, things like that you could have unlimited access to, and you pay $30 a month or $50 a month or whatever. That seems like that could be compelling. And I know you framed it as Duolingo for management training, which also I think makes a lot of sense. So how does that work? Options here.
What you just said, I think, is actually really interesting. And there's this growing space around infotainment, right? How do you make education or informational content actually educational? And why couldn't, so many people learn what an office, I learned what, not doctors are cringing, rolling over at this, but like I learned what a medical environment, workplace environment looks like from Grey's Anatomy. So why couldn't there be something that actually sets positive standards and sets in place positive behaviors that's the office, but instead of a parody of a ridiculous workplace, something that shows a good management behavior? I don't know, maybe a little off the wall, but I think it's really interesting.
Sounds like an offsite with trust falls to me.
Yeah. Just give me the trust falls.
So going a little bit deeper into getting started with this idea, right? So when you said mid-market, I'm thinking 100 employees level. What do you think? 50 something, like setting your bar around where you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it's even on the SMB side technically to start out. You start with a business that has 50 employees and has a small class of new managers. I would also think about what's the specific program? Who are you going to address in terms of not only the company, but the actual manager in training? One thing that we heard a lot was our new managers need a program. We need like a quick boot camp, a way to then get them up and running with how to be a manager 101 when we first promote them from individual contributors. So something like that could be a great way to start, right? Say we're going to build out a new manager program. It only lasts 3 months or whatever it is. And we're going to target companies that are 50 employees or 100 employees, something in that realm.
Do you have any experiences from Laudable that looking back now, if you were starting something different like a management training platform, that would inform the way that you approach that?
I think getting in market as quickly as possible. And again, we just talked about the tricks or the challenges of doing that. But I look back on the times when I really wanted to perfect the one thing or just wanted to get it a little bit better before launching it. And every time, they're not as trivial as the color of a button, right? But they look trivial in hindsight. They were things that felt really important to me at the time. I'm trying to think of an example. Having a workflow automation in place or having a confirmation email that came along with something, whatever it may be. And it just seems irrelevant. So being able to move more quickly, I value so much more now than having everything.
I want to ask for a counterexample now of a time where you spent a lot of time on something and you thought it was worth it, or you didn't spend a lot of time on something and you wish that you spent more on it.
Well, so you know what I think, this goes back to just the classic lesson of doing fewer things better. But when I kick myself for doing something and wishing I had done it better is when I am creating a piece of content, for example, or doing something and don't put enough thought in how I'm going to use it. So I have the thing, but haven't fully thought through. I can post a version on LinkedIn and create a cut down version on for Twitter and for the website and send it to the company in advance for feedback. Like all of those steps, I feel like penning out the strategy behind how you're going to use a piece of content or actually make the most of something that you do decide to do is really important and is sometimes easy to gloss over.
Yeah, lately I've been diving in a little bit more. I mean, I've gone through different phases in my life in terms of wanting to perfect things versus just going ahead and putting them out there. And maybe it's helpful to go through phases, but there is something, just to piggyback on what you're saying and to talk about Chris's question, there's something about diving in a little bit deeper on what you're doing, just diving deeper. And we actually, Chris and I have been talking about this with Cortland from Indie Hackers and other podcasters about creating a podcast. Like, how can we make our podcast better? Right. And in some cases, what we're just trying to say is, well, how can we just dive in a little bit deeper, like do something a little bit more than we typically would, put a little bit more care, put a little bit more thought, and have it maybe even align with what you already care about. Right. Like,
I love this discussion. And I think sometimes so when I was at SparkFund, the CEO and I used to get lost in these very abstract conversations where we tried to create a mental model for all the things we were going to do. And we'd get lost in talking about things up here. And all of a sudden it loses any sense of tactical reality, like what you're going to actually do. And I could see with a podcast, you saying, here's the format of the show. Here's how we're going to make it so great. And getting stuck in sort of the abstract on how you're going to do something where you just can't, you don't learn that way, right? You just don't, you don't improve. You can't really do the thing until you do the thing.
And that's how we start singing Raffi on the show.
Now we're start
Ethan,
seeing
over to
Rafi.
you.
Wait, what does
I was
Rafi
waiting
have
for
to
the
do?
chance.
Wait,
Well,
what does Rafi have to do?
All right, I'll bridge it here, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
bridge it
Ari will
for
cut
me.
this, but I'll bridge it. In doing that, what I'm hearing and how I'm translating this may not be exactly what you're saying, but I'm translating it as you can't come up with the perfect plan. You just have to start trying some things. And in trying some things, not all of them are going to work. Not all of them are going to be perfect. Not all of them are even going to be good. But I think especially in the digital age, you can course correct much quicker than trying to create a perfect plan and then enact that perfect plan. One of my clients, he likes to say that it's much easier to guide an object in motion than it is to get an object in motion.
Yeah.
So just start doing something, you start singing Raffi on your podcast. Like that can be, if you wanted to start a podcast, you could take Raffi songs and start rapping it. Right. And like people have done that actually where,
Baby Beluga.
we heard that song all the time. Yeah. So yeah, that's the bridge there for you, Ethan. Was that satisfactory?
I think so. Yeah. So basically you're saying just whenever I'm stuck, there's a nugget for the listener. Whenever you're stuck, just start singing a Raffi
That's
tune.
fine. Yeah. That'll make you feel better at least.
My life advice. Well, it's the blank page problem, right? I mean, if you've ever tried to sit down, it's like actually agitating to our brains, at least my brain, to try to sit down and do something from scratch entirely. It's like, oh, your brain procrastinates and you're like, let me do this other thing instead. And then once you get over that first little blip, everything else is so much easier and you feel like you start getting so much momentum.
A great exercise that I don't always have to give to people, but definitely perfectionists. I give it to some of my coaching clients when they're having trouble doing something. Actually, I'll call out one of my coaching clients. At one point, he was about to propose to his girlfriend. It was all in the air. Like we all knew it was going to happen. It was kind of freezing, and it turned out it was like he was really kind of nervous about that whole ring process. Like, was he going to make like a really nice ring and design it and pull out the good stuff? And people are going to hate me for saying this, honestly, but I said, what if you did like the worst ring possible? What was that? What would that be like? Like, what if you made it the worst possible just to go ahead and do it, And I think sometimes it's an interesting exercise to get you into action, to do something, to like give yourself permission to make it horrible. And the story that we came up with that in the end, I think turned out kind of cute. And it's not what he did. He is making a cool ring and he did get into action and he got all these things going. But like, I mean, you're in love with someone, they're in love with you. They know you've been wanting to propose for months. It's not happening. And you just bring like a twist tie ring. You say, I just can't bring myself to do this. Like, I just want it to be so perfect. It's never going to happen, but I want you to know I love you and I want to get married. It's like, that would be a beautiful moment, and they could still go make the ring that they want to make and all that stuff. Like nothing has to be perfect for it to happen. And if you put it in motion, then it starts to happen. So again, just a reiteration, make the worst, whatever it is. That if you can't make anything, just make the worst, whatever it is, and see if that takes you somewhere.
Well, and it's sort of the principle in writing shitty first drafts, right? It's like get something out when there are so many variables that are up in the air. It feels really hard to optimize for all of them. Whereas if you just have a couple in place, then you can start putting things in place.
Absolutely. So what would be the shitty first draft of action steps for this idea?
Yeah, good question. I think version 1 or version 0.1 would be some type of short-term program, right? Or actually, let's pare it back even more. One activity, right? 1 week of here's your learning existing content. Here's the activity to put into practice. And then giving that to a manager who has new direct reports and then getting them to report back. You don't even have to have any digital element. It can be, here's a link to a Brene Brown podcast, listen to it, fill out these 2 lines, and then try XYZ in your next direct report meeting.
Yeah, the other thing that you're bringing to mind here in using that as an approach, first of all, this has come up on other episodes before, the idea that if you already have an audience, sometimes it's easier to create a product, right? To fill that audience. So number one, for the listener that is already doing some sort of management training or consulting, if you're already writing blog posts or you need to put out content, a blog post giving an exercise to people and some action steps they could take in a way to get back to you. It serves as a way of promoting yourself. It serves as a way of building your audience, but it also can be a piece of the puzzle when you start to put together this product, right?
That's a great idea. Even way better than what I said. I love that, right? Start to, I hate to suggest somebody start a newsletter, but right, have like free, here's your exercises weekly to give and share them out for free. Just start creating micro versions of activities for new managers. It's awesome.
To bring up newsletter, I'm not sure why you said hate to bring up the idea of newsletters. We've been hearing a lot about newsletters as a sort of intriguing
it's a hot
way.
trend, man.
Yeah,
it's a hot
Substack,
trend that people are making.
Yeah.
I'm curious why you hate it. I think that's why you're getting what you're getting to, Ethan, huh?
No, I don't hate them. I think I just am aware of how much, it goes back to the content problem. I'm aware of how many newsletters there are and how everyone is like batting down things coming into their inbox. That doesn't mean there's not a place for quality content and that people don't want it. It just is, the immediate reaction is, oh boy, another newsletter.
Got it. So is there a way to, just to beat that down even more a little bit, like, is there a way to start with a paid newsletter, for example, where you create content that's good enough, or you create a sort of a system whereby you have paid subscribers and you're giving them assignments each week and you're checking in with everybody or something like that? Any thoughts on maybe that's version 1?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and I was thinking about it as a free newsletter for v.01, but why not, right? Start to charge just a little bit, especially when, as we know, we value things we pay for, even if it's like $1. So make it $1 a week, upscale your management skills and include the exercises, send that out. Why not? I think that's a great way to start.
And again, I want to stress that, as you said, that you don't have to create the content yourself. There's this wealth of information out there. The value is in curating it and presenting it and sequencing it correctly.
Yeah. And I guess I would maybe consult a family lawyer or something around, can you charge for a newsletter that's sending out someone else's content? I'm sure there's a way around that, as there is with everything, but we'd maybe be a little cautious of that.
Before we get even deeper into the episode here, I don't want to miss the opportunity. We're talking about management. You brought up this idea. You started companies. You've worked within larger organizations. Can you name like a lesson that you learned in management, or something that like you were like, oh, duh, and once you figured it out, you found it was really useful? Any management tips?
Oh, it's so tricky because it's so counterintuitive to what you learn as an independent or an individual contributor, right? I think one thing that I made a lot of mistakes on is sort of oscillating between under managing and micromanaging, right? It's like you expect that someone should just be able to know how to do the thing that we need done as a company and run off and do with it. And you don't want to sort of, you almost feel intrusive if you're like, so how are you thinking about getting started? This is the at least initial reaction. When in reality, I think what works really well is you have a particular project, you dive in with them and sort of get your hands dirty in setting a plan of action. And then you step back and let them run with it. And check in periodically, right? But sometimes there's this fear of like, well, I don't want to micromanage, that leads to people being totally hands off and then waiting until there's a final deliverable due and being like, well, this isn't what I wanted at all, diving and doing it themselves. And then you're just really demotivating and sort of, it becomes really terrible for morale and employee spirit. So I think that's a thing, is finding the right way to be engaged without micromanaging.
Now, on top of that, you said that 75% of people, or what, they attribute 75% of the lameness of their work to their boss or something like that. Any things that you can anonymously share about terrible supervisors or bosses? Or has it all been wine and roses, or are you contractually obligated in saying that it's all been wine and roses?
No, I mean, so honestly, I'm trying to think of something, because I've made tons of missteps. I'm trying to think of something I did myself that I could actually look back on and be like, that was horrible. I think so. I'll tell you a side story. I had a job at one point in my career that I had a manager who was an engineer, and knowing, if you know me, that is probably not the best fit for my personality. Someone who looks like very by the book and very all analysis based. Needless to say, it wasn't the best direct report relationship. But he actually said I had a bit of a dissolution when they found out about a side hustle I had at the time. And he actually said to me, it'd be one thing if you were waitressing, but you make plenty of money for a young woman. And I don't know why you feel the need to go out and do this. So that was a what not to do management response.
A lot of things wrong with that.
A lot of things wrong with that.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Thankfully, you moved on from that.
Don't do that. Listener, don't do that.
Have you guys had any horror stories?
I have to bring the one up that is similar, related. It didn't happen to me, but a coworker came to me very upset. She had just been on maternity leave and she came back, and the supervisor said, and I don't know what he was thinking. He was kind of foreign, so maybe he just doesn't understand English. He got a lot of leeway, I think, for being out of the culture. He said, I brought you on this project. I expected productivity, not reproductivity. And it was just like, I don't even know why she didn't report him for that. But yeah, that was horrible to me.
How long ago was that?
That was probably 5 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And people, I was actually surprised that people tolerated that kind of thing. Because I was probably the person that was the most upset about that after she was initially upset. I think she was willing to tolerate it after the fact. And I was thinking, okay, come on. Like, that's just patently wrong. You can't talk like that. Yeah. I
mean, not to go too far off on this tangent, but I know
Let's vent. Let's vent,
I have one more along that story. It's not mine, but I know someone right now who is would want to get pregnant, but is not, because she knows that she would, she was told point blank that it would hinder her job prospects at this company.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that happens. I mean, that was 5 years ago. That's happening today. That's a shame.
I'm guessing she was told that by a male?
No, actually.
By a female.
Yeah. Her supervisor is female.
So the supervisor was probably doing that in a let me clue you into the realities of this workplace type of thing.
I don't know. I don't know what the motivation is behind her. I've never met the supervisor. It sounded like it was just a money first type of thing, I'm guessing. It's not even like it's a super small business, but that's just, yeah.
All right, now we're just on this topic. I got to throw this in there, and I want your opinion, Angela, because I don't know. I just want your opinion. And it's a weird question for me to ask, but I want to ask it.
Yeah.
Do you think that within the workplace that a company would be more productive if during a woman's cycle, if she got to take time off during the difficult parts, but maybe was expected to work a little bit more during the parts that weren't as difficult? Do you think that would increase workplace productivity, or do you think just keeping the same hours all the way a month is just as productive?
You were a courageous man, Ethan. I don't know where this is coming from. I told you at the top of the hour, I said, we talked about how Angela kills what is it, the B2B flavor. I know.
So there's a couple. First of all, I think I saw a chain on LinkedIn. I think there was some company that announced they were giving, I don't know what they called it, some sort of terribly cutesy name to time off, like menstrual time off or something absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And the comments were fire, first of all, no surprise.
I'm sure.
But really interesting and really polarizing. Some people were jumping in saying, wonderful, this is a great example of people paying attention to gender differences in the workplace and being respectful. And then other people like, this is so insulting and laughable. It's like, men making the worst ever Midol commercial and then being like, we're here for you. So personally, it rubs me the wrong way. It does not jive with me. It feels condescending and also micromanaging of like something that has nothing to do with the boss's sort of say. And so I think there are two questions. One is it appropriate? And two is, does it increase productivity? I can't speak to the productivity question. No, I don't. I don't
That's
think
why I
it
asked
increases
it. That's why I
productivity.
asked it in those terms, not like, do you
Yeah.
think it's right or wrong, but do you think it actually might increase productivity? Because that's
No,
kind of ostensibly the idea, is that you wouldn't ask people to work extra hard when they're not feeling at their best or
no,
something like that.
I don't think so. And where do you stop, right? It's like, let me look at your level of like indigestion this week and let me give you some time off for that. Right. It's like, okay, come on. I think that the zooming out, I think, and this actually does line up with the business idea that we're chatting about. I think my philosophy is, and I think where most companies are headed, we're all adults. Let's treat us all like adults who know how to manage our own energy best in the workplace. And we know how, when we need to take it a little easier. If we need to take a nap in the middle of the afternoon, that's fine, because we're working hard and we ultimately have a strong work ethic. So it's trust at the foundation and not trying to micromanage what that sort of work flow, no pun intended, looks like.
I really like that, actually, because I think that would make space for both of those populations with that responded to that post that we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
If you just said, hey, if you feel like you're not gonna be able to be productive at any point, right?
Yeah.
But you need the rest, and it's going to help you when you can be productive. You get to decide, right? I'm not going to tell you when it is, but you can decide. And then that way, some people
Right.
could make that decision, or they could decide to power through or work through.
Right.
And
Right.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not putting it in the hands of the company to determine what reasons for taking it easy or stepping back are, what are valid, right? It's just trusting people as adults and as employees and team members to make that call on their own.
Yeah, I think an essential crux of why this idea you're bringing to the table is valuable is that we're evolving very slowly out of an industrial type of workplace
100%.
where you were supposed to decree what people did. Listen, if you don't do it this way, then the factory line's not going to move forward. We need to teach you exactly how to do it. And nowadays, it's really more about, like, sort of like you said, you give them as much guidance as they need. It's almost like, like letting that glider plane off the edge of the cliff, and then they can fly wherever they like and figure out exactly how they want to do it. You just have to give them a little bit of lift off.
Completely. I mean, I think it's at the nexus of sort of a bunch of societal shifts in general. But yeah, I think that's completely accurate and a great way to analyze it.
This, I want to bring back one more reference, or bring in one more reference related to this idea. Patrick Collison, CEO of Stripe, and Tyler Cowen, he is at the Mercatus Center in George Mason. He runs a really popular podcast called Conversations with Tyler. They wrote a joint article in The Atlantic called "We Need a New Science of Progress." And the reason that I think about this is they very convincingly argue that we are stagnating as a society. We're working just as hard. Our output and our input has increased tremendously. Things are more expensive. The amount of time that we're spending on different activities is longer, but our productivity gains have not risen alongside with that. So what's missing there? And I think at the top of the hour, we talked about how I think that actually this management coaching and the idea that you're bringing up could address some of it. I'm not going to be so bold as to say it's going to take care of all of it, but coming up with ideas to assess, okay, when were periods where we were extremely productive, made huge advances as a society, and what were we doing during those times, and what's different between then and now, and can we come up with some innovative ideas to help us get to the next level, like what you've shared with us?
Yeah, I have to tell you, my brain and gut immediately goes to AI. It's like that. I can't find a way around thinking that the next sort of wave of that massive leap in productivity for us all and us each individually and collectively gaining points of leverage is just AI.
So I think that's a good point to put a pin on the episode. Just forget all this. Just go buy some robots. Hire a robot. People don't matter. So Angela, thank you very much for the conversation. Really enjoyed it. Where can people go to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, my personal page under Angela Ferrante. Also, we have a website, getlaudable.com, or the Laudable LinkedIn page.
Great. And to the listener out there, take some action on this idea. Even as we had talked about in the middle of the episode, even if you don't know exactly how it would all work out, just get in motion, and then you can course correct from there. Even if AI eats the world and it ends up being, this idea doesn't work out exactly the way that you think, you may end up with something better, something different. So let us know what you've done.
And if you say something extremely stupid to someone that you're managing, make sure you apologize profusely when necessary.
Don't do it in writing.
Yeah.
Don't do it in writing.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in, the listener, and we will see you next week.
All right. I'll log us off Facebook and YouTube.
Cool. I'm going to hit stop recording here.